All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for Adar Aleph, Mrs. Selma Wolf, for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month with immense gratitude for the refuahs from Hashem and the merit of a refuah for all of those in need, in the schus of our brave soldiers, and merit Hashem in the schus of the return of our hostages. To thank the Schwartzbaum family for dedicating all Sherman Drushos this month in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwartzbaum, Aaron Yosef ben Meir Zichron Livracha, and the Ziv, Levine, and Berman families in memory of Mr. William Ziv Zev Shmuel ben Yisrael. We dedicate our learning the Ilui Nishma Staff Sergeant Simon Shlomov, and of course all of Maseches Bava Kamma, the Ilui Nishmas Master Sergeant Yomi Charush. We also have the opportunity, I see he's with us today on Zoom, to wish Rav Steve Golaskov. He was here, yes, Steve is here on the birth of a grandson in Eretz Yisrael. Mazel tov, mazel tov. And late breaking news as of 5:12 a.m. this morning, a mazel tov to Gabi and Shane and Korn on the birth of a granddaughter. Baruch Hashem. So I think we have a little bit of a Daf Yomi shidduch going on over here. Baruch Hashem, Mirz Hashem. Steve's grandson should be Zocha, Mirz Hashem, to enter the bris of Avram Avinu Bizmano, and his parents should be Zocha, Legal Torah, or the Chuppah, or the Maisim Tovim, and Mirz Hashem, Gabi and Shana should be Zocha to see incredible nachas, Yiddish nachas, beautiful nachas from their granddaughter. May she grow up in Mirz Hashem to be a true Bas Yisrael, and an Akaras Havayis, and Ema Banim Smechan, Halavai, may she have a life of incredible accomplishment, Beruch Niyas Ubegashmias. So also with that, what a way to start the day. What a way to start the day, Baruch Hashem. Let us begin. So we actually have today's daf is an incredible daf. Today's daf is Kuf Yud 110. We are picking up Baruch Hashem at bottom of Kuf Tes Amud Beis, 5 lines up from the bottom. Tan Rabbanan. I realize I accomplish more ground when I give daf virtually than when I'm in person. All right. So as it says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan. Let's go. So Baruch Hashem. Minayin likoin sheba umakriv karbonosav b'chol eis ub'chol shashi yerseh. So this is actually a very interesting halacha. How do we know that a Kohen is able to show up whenever he wants to the Beis HaMikdash and offer up his karbanos? So we'll say that as much as we have the concept that Kohanim are split up into mishmoros, right, and each mishmar serves in a particular time in the Beis HaMikdash, a Kohen, if he has to bring his own carbon, and Rashi points out over here, Sheba umakriv im nadar karban o shahayamuta alav chatas va'asham chova makriv af b'mishmar she'eno shalo. So a Kohen who has an obligation to bring a carbon, he could show up at any time and offer up that carbon, even if his own mishmar is not on duty. Now understand the profundity of that statement. Remember, if you're a Kohen and your mishmar is on duty, that means you get any of the carbonic meat, you get the hides, there's a financial benefit to that. So now the Gemara is saying is that any stam Kohen who has to bring a carbon has the ability to show up in the Beis HaMikdash, and even though his mishmar is not on call, he has the ability to offer up his own carbon. Where do we know that? Talmud Lomar uba b'chol avas nafsho b'sheres. The pasuk says literally again, he will come with the desires of his heart, b'sheres, and he will serve, which again indicates to us that Allah the Kohen wants to offer up his carbon. He has the ability to do so. Uminayin sha'avodasa va'ora shalo. And how do we know that he gets to keep the meat and the hide? So we'll say avodasa, Rashi points out over here, is schar avodasa, literally the wages for his work, which Rashi says is the meat, and Ora, of course, are the hides. So how do we know again? Not only could he offer up the carbon, but that he has the ability to keep the meat and to keep the hides. Ta'olomar v'ish es kadashav lo yihiyah. The pasuk says, and a man and his consecrated offerings lo yihiyah will belong to him. So I say, so a dual halacha. Number one, that a Kohen can come into the Beis HaMikdash at any time and offer up his own carbon. I just want to be clear, right? A Kohen can't walk into the Beis HaMikdash and decide, you know what, today I feel like offering up karbanos. If it's not his mishmar, right? If it's not his shift, then he can't do that. This is unique, is if he has the obligation to offer up his own carbon, it's his carbon, he has the ability to come to the Beis HaMikdash and essentially usurp the rights of the existing mishmar. Even if it's not his mishmar, he has the rights to offer. Not only does he have the right to offer, he also is entitled to consume the meat as well as keep the hides. Incredible. The Gemara says, so what's the case? What's the case over here? So the Gemara says an interesting case. Let's say the kohen was a Baal Mum. So we'll say, now remember again, a kohen who has a blemish, he is not permitted to offer up a carbon, but he is permitted to eat sacrificial meat. So watch this. Hakesad im haya Baal Mum. If he was a Baal Mum, nosna kohen sheba osa mishmar. So we'll say, let's say a kohen is a Baal Mum. He has a carbon. He has a nedar and a dava that he wants to offer up. So he comes to Beis Hamikdash. Now obviously he can't offer it up. He can't offer it up, right? He can't sacrifice it. So what does he do? He gives over the animal to one of the kohanim in that particular shift. Va'avodaso va'ora shalo. But he gets to keep the meat, he gets to eat the meat and keep the hide. Keep the hide. So Rabbi says this is really very interesting. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Last Rashi in the daf. Im haya Baal Mum roi lechol ve'in roi lahakriv. So remember again, a kohen is a Baal Mum. He is permitted to eat sacrificial meat, but is not permitted to offer up the carbon. Ein yachol lasos shliach lakrava mishi yirtza ela nosna lebnei hamishmar hol v'hu roi lachila. So Rabbi, listen to this. Now here's what's interesting about this case. In general, we'll say we know Shlichus 101. Shlichus 101. You could only appoint a shliach to do something that what? That you can do yourself. If you can't do it, you can't appoint a shliach to do it. So therefore, a kohen who is a Baal Mum can't go ahead and appoint a shaliach in his stead to offer up the carbon. So instead, what does he do? He goes to the Beis Hamikdash, he gives over the animal to whichever kohen is on duty. Right? He doesn't have the right to choose a kohen. He gives it to whoever it is. So I'll say, again, I just want to conscious what's happening over here. What we just established was a regular kohen, right? A whole kohen decides, right, he has a carbon he wants to offer. He goes to the Beis Hamikdash, and he has the ability to what? To essentially displace everyone else, roll in, offer up his carbon. Offer up his carbon. That's his right as a kohen. We're going to see that technically speaking. So let's say he doesn't want to offer it up, but he wants to have his brother offer it up. But it's not his brother's mishmar. Can he appoint his brother as a shaliach to offer up the carbon in his stead? And the answer is yes. Right? Why? Because since he has the right to walk into the Beis Hamikdash and offer it up, he could appoint another kohen to offer it up, and he gets to keep the meat and the hides. When the kohen is a Baal Mum, so because he can't offer up the carbon himself, therefore he can't point the shaliach to do it either. So instead, what does he have to do? He gives the carbon over to the mishmar, whoever's on duty, they offer it up, but the kohen Baal Mum does have the right to get the meat and get the hides. That's his right. Good. What happens if the kohen ultimately again was old or was sick? So we'll see exactly what that means in just a moment. So in that case, interestingly enough, he does have the right to appoint a shaliach to offer the carbon on his behalf. In other words, another kohen to offer the carbon on his behalf, but the meat and the hide goes to the kohanim of that mishmar. So the Gemara says, okay, I don't understand. He says, Hai zakein ochol hechidami. What exactly is the case of an elderly or a sick kohen? Idamasi avid avoda. So if this kohen, although he might be elderly or ill, right, has the ability to actually do the carbon, the offer up the carbon, then avodasa va'ora nami tehevi today. Then ultimately, again, he's just like he should be able to offer up the carbon, he should be entitled to keep the meat and the hide. So the Gemara says, and if he can't do avodah, let's say he's too sick, he's too old, hechi mashvi, then how can he make a shaliach? Right? What's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, Rapapa, this is very interesting. Rapapa says, sheyachol lasos ayidei hadchak. The kohen is able to go ahead and do the carbon, but Rabbi says he's only able to do it. Ayidei hadchak means with difficulty. With difficulty. So what does this mean? Watch this. Avodahi, avodahi. So Rabbi say, if a kohen could offer up the carbon, but it's difficult, it's fine. It works. It works. Right? In other words, if you want to slaughter a carbon, you want to offer it up, even if it takes a little bit longer, it's a little bit more difficult, that's fine. That absolutely works. The Gemara says, Umashvi shliach. Now, I remember again, the whole chap over here is, as long as you could do it yourself, you could appoint a shaliach. So therefore, again, in this case over here, we have the elderly or sick kohen. If he has the ability to do the avoda, then that's fine. That's fine. So even though it takes him a little bit longer, a little more difficult, he can appoint a shaliach to do so. Now watch this. Achila, but I will say because it would be difficult for him to eat the carbon, achila ayedei adchak, achila gasehi. Wow. I will say achila that is done, consumption that is done with difficulty, has the status of achila gasa. I will say achila gasa is gluttonous consumption. Gluttonous consumption. V'achila gasa lav klumhu. And achila gasa, I will say halachically, is not recognized as a bona fide act of achila, which means that in this case you have a kohen who can't eat the carbon. Well, if he can't eat the carbon, therefore what? Therefore, mishum hachi avodasa va'ora la'anshe mishmar. Ultimately, again, the hide and the meat, or the meat and the hide, ultimately go to the kohanim who are on call, who are on duty, the Anshe Mishmar. So we'll say, so the principles are all the same. Principle number one is if a Kohen who wants to offer up his own carbon is permitted to go into the Beis HaMikdash and offer up his own carbon, even though it's not his Mishmar. He could do the Hakrava, the offering, he gets the meat, he keeps the hide. Not only that, if he's able to do so, if he's able to do all this, he could actually appoint a Shaliach. So he could say, you know what, I don't want to do it, but I want my brother to do it. And he could appoint his brother, even though it's not his brother's Mishmar, to go ahead and go into the Beis HaMikdash, offer up the carbon, and he gets to keep the meat and eat the hide, or the original Kohen can keep the meat and eat the hide. However, again, this only works if the Kohen himself is capable of offering the carbon, and if the Kohen himself is capable of consuming the carbon. Whatever he's capable of doing himself, he could appoint the shaliach for. Whatever he's not capable of doing, he can't appoint the shaliach for. Incredible. Amar Rav Sheshes, Im haya kohen tamei b'karban sibor. So I'll say this keeps getting more interesting. What happens if halocha l'maisa, he's tamei, but the carbon in question is a communal offering? Yeah, I will say now, the way it works, a carbon sibor, technically speaking, can be offered up even by Kohanim Tameim. Look at Rashi. Im haya kohen, it's this first short line of Rashi. Im haya kohen shel hamishmar tamei v'yesh lo karban sibor lahakriv. If the kohen, now we'll have to define the parameters of this case in just a bit, but let's say the kohen of the particular mishmar is tamei, and he has a carbon sibor. And I will say, we know the concept of tuma hutra b'sibor, the concept that sometimes the laws of tuma are set aside when it comes to communal offerings. So now watch this. If he was a kohen tamei, now I will say, now in this case, we're talking about the kohen of the actual mishmar. So kohen tamei b'karban sibor nosna l'chol mi sheyirtza. He can go ahead and give it to any kohen who he wants. But the meat and the hide, they remain the property of the Kohanim who are on call. Take a look at Rashi. So I will say, all this is saying is like this. Remember, anytime you could do it yourself, you could appoint a shaliach. So therefore, again, if you have a Kohen, and let's say he's even part of that mishmar, it's his turn to offer up the carbon. It's a carbon sibor. Carbon sibor could be offered up bituma. So now he decides he doesn't want to offer it up. He could assign that right to another Kohen. However, the meat and the hide become the property of the Kohanim of that mishmar. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Hey Chidami, can you please tell me what the case is? Now watch this. So, I will say, the way this case sounds like is, how is the Gemara setting it up? This Kohen is Tameh. Now when you say this Kohen is Tameh, what does it make it sound like? Other Kohanim are Torim. Now, obviously, if other Kohanim are Torim, then what should be the halacha? Then those Kohanim should do the avodah. What are you doing giving this Kohen avodah if he's Tameh? So I will say now, if no one is tahar and everyone is tamei, then avodasa va'ora la'anshe mishmar hatmeim ninhu v'lo matzi achli. It doesn't make sense. The license for a kohen who is tamei to do avoda, right, really only applies in two circumstances. Number one, carbon sibor, communal offerings. Number two, all it allows for is the actual offering of the carbon. What doesn't it allow for? What doesn't allow for? Consumption. So if we're talking about Kohanim Tameim, then how are you allowing consumption, right? And most, all you should be allowing for is the actual offering itself. What's the case? Here we go. So I'll say what it means is like this. What it means is you're right. Technically speaking, we're talking about a situation where all eligible Kohanim are Tameim. So I'll say if that's the case, then hakrava, the offering could be done. And the truth is, a Kohen who, let's say we'll call Aaron a Kohen. Aaron a Kohen was the one whose turn it is to offer up the carbon. He could assign that right to whoever he wants. Now they're all Tameim, but because it's his right, he could assign it. None of them, the Kohanim Tameim, get to eat the carbon. So who do you give the carbonos to in such a situation like that? If you have Kohanim who are Bali Mumin, but are Tahorin. Because remember again, a Kohen who's a Baal Mum, a Kohen who has one of the biblically mentioned blemishes, cannot offer a carbon. But what can he do? What can he do? He could consume the carbon. It's a very, very interesting and important distinction. Okay, Amr Vashi. Imhaya Kohen Gadol Onein, no sin l'chol Kohen sheyirtzeh, va'avodasa va'or la'anshe mishmar. So Rabbi say another fascinating halacha. Let's say the Kohen Gadol was an Onein. Now remember again, I will say an Onein is someone who has lost a relative on the day of death. So there's differently. That wasn't good English. Kohen has lost a relative. His status on the day of death is an Onein. Now the halacha is normally Kohanim do not offer up karbanos in a state of aninos. The exception to this rule, Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol makriv. This is Parsha Shmini. Parsha Shmini, Aaron and his sons, lost of Nadav and Avihu. So Kohen Gadol is makriv onein, but only a Kohen Gadol only does the hakrava, only does the offering as an onein. He does not consume sacrificial meat while in a state of aninos. So therefore the Gemara says like this: Imhaya Kohen Gadol onein. If the Kohen Gadol was an onein, no snalachal Kohen sheyirtzeh. So he has the right to assign the privilege to sacrifice the carbon to any Kohen who he wants. So we'll say, what's the logic behind that? What's the logic behind that? Now remember, this is talking about a Kohen Gadol who has his own carbon, Rashi points out. V'yichshel carbon atzmo lahakrid. So the Kohen Gadol has his own carbon that he wants to offer. So now he's an onein. Can a Kohen Gadol go ahead and offer up a carbon as an onein? Yes. So because he has the ability to offer up as an onein, what does he have the right to do? What does he have the ability to do? To assign it. So he can assign it to whoever he wants. However, va'avodasa va'ora la'anshe mishmar. But the meat and the hide go to the Kohanim of that mishmar. I will say why? Why? Because since the Kohen Gadol doesn't have the right to consume the carbon, therefore that is an unassignable right, right? You could only assign a right that you have a particular sense of entitlement to. But in this case over here, because the Kohen Gadol can't eat the meat, therefore the meat and the hide are not his. Because they're not his, he can't assign them. Because he can't assign them, who do they go to? They go to the Kohanim of that mishmar. Good. Pashat. The Gemara says, Gemara says there's absolutely no chiddush in this case. This is Mishnah Pasuk in the Torah. Tanina, or I should say it's the Mishnah. Kohen Gadol makrivonin, right? Ve'ino ochel, ve'ino cholik. Le'achol erev. So Rabbi says an explicit halacha. Kohen Gadol could offer up a carbon while in a state of aninos. He could do the actual carbon, the actual sacrificing, but he cannot eat the carbon. Not only that, you can't set aside a portion for him for that evening. As well, remember again, Rashi points out over here that aninos, at least biblical aninos, only applies by day. So already that night he's out of the state of aninos. So you might have thought, okay, as long as there's a sacrificial portion that he could consume that night, just let him eat it that night. You can't do that. You can't do that. The carbon was offered up in a state of aninos. As much as the Kohen Gadol is permitted to offer it up, he's not permitted to have a portion for consumption. So I will say, what's the chiddush? To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. So the Gemara says, I would have thought, I would have thought, when does the Kohen Gadol have a license? He has a license to sacrifice, to offer, when he himself is doing it. But if the Kohen Gadol, but I would have thought that maybe as an onein, while the Kohen Gadol has the right to offer up the carbon himself, he does not have the right to assign that, to make a shaliach. Kamash Malan, he does. It just follows in line with the logic of the entire sugya. That essentially, essentially what we started is like this. A Kohen has a unique right that as much as Kohanim are split up into mishmoros, whenever a Kohen wants to offer up his own carbon, he has the right to roll into the Beis HaMikdash and do it, and displace the mishmar. Not only that, he has the right to offer it, he has the right to eat the meat, he has the right to go ahead and keep the hides. Not only that, but when the kohen has his own karban, because he could do it, he could assign that right to someone else. And whichever kohen he assigns that right to, also like him, has the ability to offer it, to eat the meat, and to keep the hide. However, you only have the right to assign a right, you only have the ability to assign that right when you are capable of doing it yourself. So if whatever as a kohen you can't do yourself, you can't assign. So therefore, again, halacha lamaisa, a kohen who's a baal mum who has a karban, as much as he's entitled to eat the meat and keep the hide, he can't assign the right of slaughter to whoever he wants. He comes to Beis Hamikdash, gives it to whoever is on call. Kohen gadol who's an onain, he has the right to go ahead and assign the right of slaughter, but doesn't have the right to assign the meat and the hide. Why? Because as the kohen gadol, even as an onain, he has a right to offer, but doesn't have a right to consume the meat and the hide in a state of anina. So we'll say, absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. How have I in the Schos Emeretz Hashem of learning all these beautiful sugyas concerning the hakrava of the various kohanim should be zoch Emeretz Hashem to see the kohanim reactivated in their duty, reactivated in third base of Mikdash here Rabbi Yameinu Amen. We'll say let's go on the Mishnah. Hagos lo sager. So we'll say this is actually very interesting. We actually quoted this Mishnah in yesterday's daf. Here we go. Here it is. Hagos lo sager v'nishpalo. So we'll say, so watch this. I steal from a ger, and I'm confronted by the theft, and I lie. I swear that I did not steal. Umeis, and now the ger dies. I will say now the unwritten part of the Mishnah is what happens after the ger dies. I admit that I swore falsely. So what's the halacha? Harezem mishalim karen v'chomesh lakohanim ba'ashal mizbeach. So what says here it is. We'll say so I have to pay karen and chomesh to the Kohanim, right? And that money, the money literally goes to the Kohanim. And carbon asham. And of course, I don't think I mentioned this in yesterday's shir, but of course, what's incredibly unique about this halacha is you're chayiv all of these payments, but yet again, the person to whom you are chayiv is dead, right? Which of course you never have in halacha. Now remember what's unique about this. Already the Gemara spoke this out. Lashem la kohanim. So what's unique about this is when you make that hodah, when you make that admission, essentially the Ribono Shel Olam takes over the debt of the ger. That's what's happening over here. My admission is to the Ribono Shel Olam, who then, when he takes possession of the item, conveys ownership over it to the kohanim. So the Gemara says, Shneimar, where do we know this from? Vim ein la ish goel, la hashiv ha'asham elav, ha'asham hamushav la'ashem, la kohen, milvat ela kiporim asher yechaper bo'alav. So we'll say, because the pasuk itself says, if a person does not have any redeemers, person doesn't have any relatives, to return the stolen object to, Ha'asham, Hamushav, right? The literally again the guilt offering, the guilt item that has to be returned. La'Shem, la'Kohen. It'll go to Hakadosh Baruch Hu, then it goes to the Kohen. Milvat ela kippur m'shei chaper. In addition to the karban asham that you also have to go ahead and offer up. Okay, so we'll say, so that's it. That's Gezel Ager. We've been talking about it for so long, but this is the Mishnah now. This is the Mishnah of Gezel Ager. Next. Hayamala asa kesev asa asham umeis. Umeis was this interesting case. So let's say we'll call him Ruvain. Ruvain stole from a ger. Same case. Ruvain stole from ger, swore that he did not steal from ger. Ger died. Ruvain admitted his guilt. Now what is he doing? What's the first thing he's doing? Trip to the Beis Hamikdash. What is he going to be doing in the Beis Hamikdash? What is he doing? Great, Karen, Chomesh to the Kohanim, and Asham offered up on the Mizbeach. Okay, so now what happens? So Reuben's going up to Yerushalayim, Umeis. He dies on the way to Yerushalayim. He dies on the way. So what do you do with everything? So watch this. So Akesef Yinasein Labanam. So this is very interesting. The money, i.e. the Karen and the Chomesh, goes back to Reuben's kids. Essentially, it becomes an inheritable asset. Reuven's kids get back. Now what's the pshat with that? Take a look at Rashi. Second Rashi in the Mishnah. Rashi is right across from Tosos LeBaali Mumin. Hakesef Yinasin LeBaalav Shal Gazlon. Why? Zocha Be Mimisas Hager. So we'll say, listen to this. This is a fascinating Rashi. Let's play this out. When Reuven steals from Ger, right? And Ger dies. and ger dies. What's the halacha? And remember, we're talking about a case where the ger has absolutely no relatives. Let's say, what is, as they say, the halacha yiveish, right? What's the pure halacha, right? It's Ruvain's. That's it. There's nothing more to talk about. Let's say you can't owe money to someone if there's no one claiming it, right? So at the end of the day, ger died. There's no relatives. Ruvain really is the owner of that money. As much as it came to him in an inappropriate way, Lamaisa, he is the owner of the money. So Rashi points out over here. Rashi says, "Ella de boile avarashava ki hecha de tehavele kapara ashvu asay." So we'll say, so why is it if Ruvain is technically the legal owner of the money, then why does he have to give it back? And what's the answer? The answer is because he swore falsely. That's really what's driving all of this. He swore falsely, admitted his false oath, and requires atonement for the oath. That's what's driving this. Remember again, he's not returning the money to make good, to do good by the ger. Why not? Why not? The ger is dead. Right, the ger is dead. Right, well, so you know what the great part about being dead is? The great part about being, you hold no grudges. Right, the dead hold no grudges. So as far as the ger is concerned, ger and Reuven, we're good. Right, we're good. Right, I'm dead, you're not, we're fine. Right, we're right. No grudges here. So I'll say so now what Reuven has to settle up is a shvua, as a false oath. Shvua sheker, right? Is a false oath. He has to go ahead and settle this up. So that's why he has to go ahead and pay the keren, the chomesh, and the asham. He needs the kapara. Now watch this. Rashi says, Vizigmar says, the hashta suleka kapara keva de mislei. Now listen, now what happens over here? In this case, Reuven died, right? Reuven dies on the Beis Hamikdash. Now let's say what happens once he dies, he no longer needs the kapara. He no longer needs the kapara. So the kapara, it's actually a very profound statement. Kapara is a gift given to the living. Kapara is a gift given to the living. Once you die, your assets are frozen, right? So whatever you did or you didn't do, whatever you did or you didn't do, that's for you to reflect on for eternity. Kapara is a gift given to the living. I will say that's why we have such an urgency to do tshuva. Shuv yom echad lifnei mosecha. Repent. Do tshuva one day before you die. I never know the day that I'm going to die. Exactly. Like Shlomo Melech says, make sure my clothing is white at all times. Kapara is a gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us to right the wrongs, but you only have that gift when you are living and breathing. The moment you leave this world, that opportunity is lost. Now, there are other ways for the dead to receive kapara, and that's ultimately, again, through the actions of the living. Well, but that's a separate topic. So the idea over here is that when Reuven's on the way up to the Beis Hamikdash, and he dies, we're done. The whole point of the returning of the Keren and the Chomesh was to effect atonement for Reuven. Now that Reuven's dead, that he no longer needs that atonement. So Moshe says, now we go full circle. Now that he no longer needs that atonement, Moshe, whose money does that? Who does the money belong to? Whose money belong to? Reuven's estate. Because let's remember again, once the ger died and there were no claimants on the money, as much as it was ill-gotten money, at the end of the day, it was Reuven's property to begin with once the ger died. The only thing pushing him to return it to the Kohanim was the fact that he needed kapara for his false oath. But now he's dead. He doesn't need the kapara, so the money becomes his children's property. We'll say it's incredible. How right? I'm sorry. So that's right. So I can't say if you know in the bottom. What about the asham? Right? That works to the Karen and the Chomesh. What about the asham? Va'asham yira achi staiv. So what the asham is, you let the animal graze until it develops a mum. The yimkar v'yiplu dama v'nadava. Then sell it off and use the proceeds for a carbon adava. Right? Remember again, the animal obviously can't revert back to being a mundane animal. So the way it does work now, we'll say here's the problem. You also can't offer it up as an asham. Why can't you offer it up as an asham? Why not? Because halacha l'maisa, asham shemesu balav. You can't offer up an asham if there's not an owner of that sin offering. So Reuven's dead. His kids can't offer up an asham on his bed. There's no such thing like that. So instead, what they do is let it graze, develop a mum. Once it's blemished, you could sell it. Again, the money's still consecrated, so they'll have to use the money for another carbon for an adava. Incredible case. Next, nasan kesef la'anshe mishmar meis. So we'll say now, what happens? Watch this. What happens if Reuven went up to Yerushalayim, he gave the Keren and the Chomesh to the Kohanim, and then he died? The kids are like, come on, you couldn't do that 5 minutes earlier. Right? So let's say, the Gemara says, "Nasan hakesef la'anshe mishmar umeis, ein hayarshin yicholen lahotzi miyadam." So I'll say, so in that case, right, so the Yarshim can't extract the money from the Kohanim, obviously, because it's already been given to the Kohanim. Shneimar, v'ish asher yitin l'kohen lo yihiyah. Because the Pasuk says, essentially, when you give something to a Kohen, it becomes the portion of the Kohen. Okay? Nasan, we'll say now, watch this. Nasan hakesef liYehoyariv va'asham liyidaya. Okay, so we'll say, so let's take a typical case, right? A typical case is Reuven stole, I mean, not a typical case for this inappropriate case, right? So Reuven stole from Ger. Swore that he did not steal. Ger dies. Reuven admits liability. Moment Reuven admits liability, what happens? The Ribono Shalom becomes the owner of the Keren, the Chomesh, and the obligation to the Asham, and transfers all of that to the Kohanim. Fine. The way it would work in a paradigmatic case is Reuven goes up to the Beis HaMikdash, finds whatever mishmar is on call, says, guys, here's the Keren, here's the Chomesh, offer up this Asham, and Reuven has now achieved his kapara. Good. Done. So I'll say, so now, what happens, however, if he splits the giving of the money and the giving of the asham between two different mishmoros? So let's say, for example, he shows up week 1, he gives the money, Karen and Chomesh, to the mishmar of Yehoyariv, and then comes back the next week and gives the asham to the mishmar of Yedaya. We'll say these are actual names. These are names of Kohanic mishmoros. He gives like that. So we'll say, so the Gemara Mishnah says, Yatsa. It works. Don't ask why someone is doing this. The why is irrelevant. This is what he did. Now we'll say, now take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Mishmeres Yehoyariv, Rashi says, Rishon l'chol mishmaros sheyidai achara. So we'll say, by the way, the order over here is actually specific. Rashi says Yehoyariv was the first of the 24, and Yedaya was the next one. Yedaya was the next one. Look at the next Rashi. Nasan hagazlanas hakesef lo Yehoyariv b'mishmarto v'achar nasan asham liyedaya b'mishmarto. So again, that's our case. Week 1 he shows up, gives the money to Yehoyariv, and next week shows up and gives the asham to Yedaya. So Rashi says, Yatsa, he's Yosei, that works. Why? Rashi, Kidim Mefarsh Azil, Shamevi Gzelo Ad Shelo Hevi Karban Ashamo Yatsa, V'zeh Zacha B'Shel V'zeh B'Shel. We'll say, we're going to see why does this work? Because we'll say, technically speaking, the thing you have to bring first is, the money has to be given, and then the carbon offered. That is the order, as we're going to see. If you offer up the carbon first and haven't given the money, doesn't work. So therefore, in this case over here, week 1, Reuven showed up, gave the mishmar the money, and week number 2, he showed up and gave the carbon. Fine, not ideal. We'd rather kind of like one-stop shopping, do everything at once. But l'maisa, if you did it, it works. Conversely, asham lo Yehoyariv the kesef liyedaya. But I will say, if you reverse the order and you gave the asham first, week 1 to Yehoyariv, and then the second week you gave the money to Yedaya, then I will say, now watch this. Now, assuming that Yehoyariv offered the carbon, so we'll say, if for some reason the mishmar of Yehoyariv didn't offer the carbon, and so by the time Yedaya gets on duty, that carbon is still there, fine. Then let Yedaya now has the money, let them offer up the carbon, Shalom HaYisrael. Ve'imlo, we'll say, what happens if Yehoyariv offered up the carbon already? They offered it up, so we'll say, so if that's the case, then ultimately it doesn't work. Yachzir v'yavi asham acher. Wow. The Rebbe say Reuven would have to come back to the Beis HaMikdash and offer up another carbon. Why? Shamevi gzelo at shlohevi ashamo yatza. Because the Rebbe say, halacha l'maisa, if you pay the money before you go out and bring the carbon, that's fine. Hevi hashamat shelo, hevi gzelo lo yatsa. But if you brought the carbon before you paid the money, it does not work. And I will say, by the way, what's the svara? It's very simple. The Rebbe Shalom says, do not bring your carbon until you pay back the money. I don't want to see your carbon until you pay back the money. I will say that's like an empty offering. Unless you stole, you have to give back that's what you stole. Be a mensch. be a mensch, make good on your interpersonal obligations as much as the ger is dead, but make good on your interpersonal, and then you could offer me a carbon. So we'll say, so the order over here is very specific. Therefore, if you showed up and gave to Yehoyarav the asham, assuming they offered it, and then you came the next week and you gave to Yedaya the money, that does not work. The money works fine. In other words, you've returned the money, but you'd have to come back now and offer up another carbon that could be offered after the return of the money. Incredible. What happens if Reuven showed up in the Beis HaMikdash and what he did is he paid the keren, gave the asham, but didn't pay the chomesh. Then what's the halacha? The Gemara says, so I'll say ultimately the chomesh is not ma'akev kapara, it's a debt. He owes. Reuven will still owe the chomesh, but his kapara is complete. So he has a debt, he has an ayu. So we'll say, so we see this concept that chomesh is not ma'akev. Okay? Incredible. Wow. We'll say a lot packed into that Mishnah. A lot in. Let's see. Gemara. Tanrabanon. Asham. So we'll say now the Gemara is just going to go through a little bit of like the exposition of the psukim. So here we go. So Tanrabanan Asham Zeh Keren. So we'll say in the pasuk. Now remember again, we'll say the pasuk that they're referring to. The pasuk that they're referring to is V'im ein la'ish goel la'shiva asham elav. Right, if the person, the ger who died, does not have a relative, right, to return the stolen object to him. Ha'asham hamushav la'Hashem la'kohen. So the asham hamushav, the literally again the stolen item that will be returned la'Hashem. LaKohen milvad ela kippur she'chaper alav shall be returned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who then gives it to the Kohanim in addition to the carbonic obligation. All right, so now let's go. Tanabanan Asham Zek Karban. So we'll say Asham, that refers to the carbon. I'm sorry, Zekaren, Zekaren, this refers to the principle, thank you. Hamushav, that is returned, Ze Chomesh. This refers to the additional fifth. Oh, Eina Ella Asham, maybe Asham actually, Oh, Eina Ella Asham Ze Ayil, so maybe Asham actually means the carbon. Ulamai nafkamina. So we'll say, what does it really matter? In other words, at the end of the day, here's what we know. Contained in this pasuk is the obligation to do what? Give keren, chomesh, and carbon asham. What does it matter kind of what you assign what to? Ulamai nafkamina. Lafukimi de Rava. Comes to the position of Rava. What does Rava hold? The Amar Rava, gezel hager shech zira balayla lo yatsa. So let's listen to this. Rava says, if you go ahead and same our case of gezel hager, but you show up in the Beis HaMikdash at night, right? And you give back the Karen and the Chomesh at night. So Rava says you're not Yotze. Or Hechziru Chatzan Lo Yatsa. Or Rava say you show up in month 1, you pay back half of the Karen and Chomesh, and month 2, the other half of the Karen and Chomesh. That doesn't work. My time, but what's the reason? Asham Karye Rachmana. So also the Torah calls the repayment in Asham. Calls it an asham. So Rabbi says, now listen to this. Just like an asham cannot be offered up at night, therefore the return of the money cannot be done at night. And just like an asham cannot be done in halves, so too the return cannot be done in halves. So the Gemara says, Kishu Omer Ela Kippurim. Therefore we'll say when it says Ela Kippurim, Have Omer Asham Zekaren. So we'll say Ela Kippurim refers to the carbon, and therefore again asham refers to the karen itself. Now Rabbi says, here's what's interesting. So now, why does the Torah refer to the keren as asham? And what's the answer? To kind of endow it with certain asham-like qualities. That's the idea over here. That just like asham can't be offered up at night, so too repayment can't be done at night. Just like asham can't be offered up in parts, so too again repayment can't be done in parts. Incredible. Tanya idach, another brayso. Asham ze keren. Asham, the word asham in the pasuk refers to repayment to the principal. Hamoshav, that is returned. Zeh chomesh, this refers to chomesh. Oh, eina ela asham zeh chomesh. Maybe asham refers to chomesh. Lamay nafkamina. Why would this matter? La fuki mimas nisin, to exclude from the Mishnah. What's the Mishnah? This nan. Nasan la sagem v'lo nasan la chomesh. So what do we learn in the Mishnah? Last line of the Mishnah. If Reuven returned the karen but didn't return the chomesh of the kohanim, right? Eina chomesh ma'akev. Chomesh is not ma'akev. I would say, Adrabah, Chomesh Ma'akev. Chomesh should be Ma'akev because maybe the Torah is calling Chomesh the Asham. Kishomer, Vehesheves Ashamo Birosho. The Pasuk says, you shall go ahead and return the Asham. That refers to Karen. V'chamishiso. And the additional fifth, Havi Omer, Asham Ze Karen. We see from here that Asham ultimately refers to the principle to the Karen. Tanya Idach, another Braisa, Asham Ze Karen. Asham refers to Karen. Hamoshav, that is returned, Ze Chomesh, that refers refers to chomesh. Ubegezel hager hakasam medaber. And the Torah is talking about a man who stole from a ger. The Gemara says, "Oh, Eino Elo Hamoshav Zekefel." Ooh, maybe Moshav is talking about Kefel. Now we'll say, now remember again. And what are we talking about over here? Ubegnevas Hager Hakasam Medaber. Now we'll say, remember, maybe we're not talking about Gezel. We're talking about Geneva. Let's remember again. We're back to our Kefel days. Kefel is the double payment that is only levied upon a person in a case of surreptitious theft. Right? You go ahead and you steal under the cover of darkness, under the cover of secrecy, as opposed to Gezel, which is like straight out. So we've been setting up this pasuk talking about Gezel Hager. Maybe it's not Gezel Hager, maybe it's Gnevas Hager, and maybe I will say maybe Hamoshav is referring to Kefel, to which the Gemara says Kishu Omer v'heishev es ashamo birosho v'chamishiso. So we'll say the pasuk says you shall return that which you owe, the guilt item that you owe, birosho, literally again on its head, v'chamishiso on its head, and an additional fifth, hare mamon hamishtalim birosh hakasam medaber. We're talking about money that is paid birosh. Now we'll say the Gemara understands birosh over here means on its own. On its own, meaning not a double payment, only a principal payment. What's a case of theft that requires only a principal payment and not a double payment? That's Gezel, and not Geneva. All right, so we'll say incredible. So we'll say, so bottom line, by the way, what comes out over here from this drush, and it's very important, is that when the Torah speaks about, again, lahashiv es ha'asham elav, asham refers to Karen. Because remember again, don't get confused. Even though the thief has to offer up what? A karban asham, that's referred to later on in the pasuk of milvad el hakipurim. In addition to the atonement offering, that's the asham. Asham in the first part of the pasuk, it really refers to keren, refers to the principal payment that you have to make. Why is it called the principal payment in asham? To endow it with asham-like qualities, namely, can't bring it back at night, and can't repay it in parts. Gufa, let's analyze a bit more. Amar Rava, Gezla Hager Sheikh Zero Balayla. Here it is. So Rava said, a ger, right? Gezla ger. If the thief goes ahead and tries to return it that night, comes to the Beis Hamikdash at night, right, and wants to repay the money at night, so the Gemara says, Lo yatsa, it doesn't work. Hechziru chatzan, similarly again, if you try to repay it in parts, Lo yatsa, it doesn't work. My time, what's the reason? Asham kari rachmana, the Torah calls the repayment of the principal an asham. And therefore, again, an asham can't be offered up at night, and an asham can't be brought in parts. Rava said, Gezla ger she'ein bo shava pruta. I say, this is wild. Rava said, listen to this. Let's say, get ready for this. All right, Reuben stole from the ger. Same case of us. Stole from the ger, swore that he didn't. Ger died. Now admits liability. He's going up to Beis Hamikdash to pay his keren and his chomesh. We'll say, what happens? Let's say the amount that he stole, when you divide it amongst the mishmar, because that's what happens. Well, so remember again, when you bring back that money that you stole, you bring it to Beis Hamikdash. Who's getting it? The mishmar. It's evenly divided amongst the mishmar. Let's say when you evenly divide it amongst the mishmar, there's less than a pruta for every kohen. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Lo yotzi yedei chavaso. The thief is not yotzei. The thief is not Yotze's obligation to return the stolen object. So we'll say, so what does he do? By the way, look at this. This is crazy. Right? Not crazy. Rashi says over here, the whole coin of coin. Look at last line. Shem mishmar umosif mishalo od lahashlim. So what does he have to do? Rabbi says, well, Rashi says he has to add on additional money. So if Reuben shows up with the stolen money, and when they do the math, they divide it up amongst the mishmar, every coin it gets less than a pruta, Reuben must contribute additional personal funds to bring the repayment above the pruta threshold for every single coin. Wow. The Gemara says, my time, what's the reason? Because Rabbi said the halach is you have to return the stolen property to the kohanim. We'll say for something to be considered a halachic return, a hashava, it has to be significant. What's the basic threshold of monetary significance? A pruta. Incredible. So if there's not enough of the stolen money to give every single coin in the mishmar a pruta, so Ruvain, you got to make them whole. You got to add on from your own money to give them a pruta's worth. By Rava, also listen to this. Ein bo l'mishmeres yo yariv, v'yesh bo l'mishmeres amad beis, v'yesh bo l'mishmeres yidaya mahu. So I will say this is a fascinating case. So let's say You return the money, and there's not enough. Remember, the mishmaros were different sizes. So let's say when you bring back the money, if you were to divide it up amongst the mishmar of Yehoyariv, there wouldn't be enough. But if you divide it up amongst the mishmar of Yedaya, there is enough. So Mahu, what's talacha? So the Gemara says, well, what's the case? Hey, Hidami. So I don't understand. If we're talking about a case where you're showing up in the Beis HaMikdash, and it's the shift of Yedaya, and you're dividing it up amongst Yedaya, then Shalom HaYisrael, everything is great. Lo tzricha, watch this. Lo tzricha, diyavi liyedaya b'mishmarta diyehoyariv mai. So we'll say, now watch this. No, what's the case? This is incredible. Right, Reuven is showing up to Beis HaMikdash. It's so exciting to be in the Beis HaMikdash. Right, Reuven is showing up to Beis HaMikdash, and whose shift is it? It's the shift of Yehoyariv. They're the mishmar on call. But what does Reuven do? Right, Reuven's a shtickle accountant, so he realized it's not good. Right, so if I go ahead and I give it to Yehoyariv, I'm going to have to pay extra money. So instead, what does he do? He just decides on his own to give the money to the mishmar of to give to Yedaya. Right? So again, it's the when he calls them to the Beis HaMikdash, it is the mishmar of Yehoyariv. He does the math. If I give it to them, I'm going to have to supplement. So he makes the decision, I'm going to give it to Yedaya. He's going to give it to Yedaya. So the Gemara says, "Ma'is, does that work?" So mi amiran kevan delav mishmartahu, since it's not the mishmar of Yedaya, v'lo klumhu. Therefore, we'll say that's not a hashava. You can't do that. The way it works is who gets gezel hager? Who gets it? The shift on call, right? So you can't decide to give it to someone else because it fits your financial needs better. The other possibility is maybe not. Maybe Rabbi will say, since this money would have never really been a good fit for Yehoyariv, why not? Because they would have gotten less than a pruta, so maybe it's not fit, so to speak, for this mishmar, and by definition it should go to a mishmar that ultimately would be meaningful for, like Yedaya. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Teiku. All right, Samara leaves this one open. Interesting. So, by Rava, Kohanim ma'ashichu. So, let's listen to this. Kohanim ma'ashi yichleku gezel hager kineged gezel hager. So, we'll say this is great. Are Kohanim allowed to trade portions? Now watch this. So we'll say, so let's say again, Baruch Hashem, it's been a busy week, a busy Gezel Hager week. Right? People are learning the Sugya Daf Yomi. Everybody wants to be about Tshuva. So I realize, right, Reuven realizes, Shimon realizes that, we stole from Gerin, we swore, we admitted. So everybody's bringing up their Gezel Hager. So we'll say, so what happens? So now Reuven brings up his Gezel Hager on Monday, and Shimon brings up his Gezel Hager on Tuesday. So we'll say, are Kohanim allowed to trade their respective portions of Gezel Hager with each other? I will say, now this would make a bit more sense if we're talking about a situation where, let's say, Reuven and Shimon are paying back their Gezel Hager in merchandise. In other words, let's say they stole sheep from the ger. The sheep are still there, right? So Reuven's bringing up his Gezel Hager, which is sheep, and let's say Shimon's bringing up his Gezel Hager, which are oxen. All right, all in the same mishmar. So now, could the Kohanim trade? Right? What do you think Kohanim do during recess, right? In other words, right? They get recess, right? They're trading snacks, they're trading Gezel Hager, right? So can they trade their stuff, their respective portions with each other? So Miyamina, so I'll say, now watch what this entails. Miyamina, Asham Kai Rachmana. So I'll say, on one hand, the Torah calls Gezel Hager Asham, right? It calls it an Asham. Now we'll say, Ma Asham in Cholkin Asham Kineged Asham. We'll say, now remember again, when it comes to portions of karbanos, we know Kohanim cannot trade with each other, right? You get what you get. In other words, you cannot trade. And obviously, logically, it makes sense. That would be a terrible lack of kavod to Karbonic portions, right? So we know. So on one hand, the Torah calls it an asham, and we know that karbanos you can't trade. Av gezel ein cholkin gezel hager keneged gezel hager. So I say the same thing. You can't trade one portion of gezel hager for another portion. Oh dilma gezel hager mamonahu. Well, see, on the other hand, it's not a carbon. What is it? It's money. Or in other words, or it's a commodity. It's not a carbon. As much as the Torah calls it a carbon, I understand Rabbi said it calls it a carbon. Why? To tell you that you can't bring it back at night and you can't bring it back in pieces. But at the end of the day, it's not a carbon. So what can you do? Can you trade or not? So Hadir Pashta. So they answered afterwards. Asham Kai Rachmana. Torah calls it an Asham, I will say. So Rav Acha said, So the Gemara answered, we call it an asham, we call it an asham, we treat it like a carbon. Therefore, it is endowed with carbonic qualities, and just like Kohanim can't trade carbonic portions, they also can't swap Gezel Hager portions as well. Rav Acha bar Rava masni la behedja. Rav Acha bar Rava answered this explicitly. He said, Amar Rava, Kohanim ein cholkin Gezel Hager kneged Gezel Hager. Kohanim cannot trade portions of Gezel Hager. Right? My taima, Asham Kayi Rachmana. Torah calls it an Asham. So we'll say, since the Torah endows it, so to speak, with quasi-carbonic identity, therefore, halacha l'maisa, Kohanim can't trade their respective portions. And I will say, that is how the Rambam paskins, halacha l'maisa. Beautiful. By Rava. For us, say, incredible Gemara today. Absolutely incredible Gemara today. By Rava, Kohanim begezel Hager, Yarshin Havu, or Mekabli Matanosu. Okay, so we'll say, now watch this. How do we view Kohanim's entitlement to Gezel Hager? Right? Are they considered to be Yarshim? Others will say, do we look at this almost like a right that they inherit? Or are they considered to be recipients of gifts? Okay, we'll see what the nafkamina is in just a moment. So my nafkamina, what does it matter? What does it matter? I'll tell you why. Kigon, watch this. Kigon shegazel chametz shara lava pesach. Now watch this. Here's the case. Ruvain stole chametz from the ger. So now what happened? What happened? Ruvain swore that he didn't steal it. Ger dies, and now Ruvain admits that he has liability. He has to go ahead and now bring back Karen, Chomesh, and the carbon asham. Meanwhile, what's happened? Pesach has passed. So I'll say, so now the stolen item that Reuven has in his possession is chametz sha'avar lava Pesach. What can you do with chametz sha'avar lava Pesach? What can you do with it? Okay, do with it? You can throw it in the garbage. That's pretty much all you can do with it, right? In other words, there's no benefit to be gleaned, but it's still extended. Now remember, it's important to remember one thing. Pause here for just a moment. Gezel Hager. What happens halacha l'maisa if Reuven were to steal from Shimon chametz, and then again Pesach goes by, and Reuven decides he wants to be a Baal Tshuva, and the chametz is still extant? What could Reuven do? Right? Reuven goes back. He gives the chametz back to Shimon. And he says, "What does he say? Right? That magical phrase. Harei shalcha lefanecha. 3 words. Here it is. This is what I stole from you. This is what I'm giving you back." And again, I will say that's it. Reuven has discharged his obligation, even though he is effectively giving Shimon back something fundamentally worthless. So I'll say, so now, what do you do like this in a case of Gezel Hager, where the item that's being returned out to the Kohanim is chametz shavar lava Pesach? So watch this. I amrit yarshin havu. If you look at the Kohanim almost as the inheritors of the ger. Right? That's how we look at that. Kohanim are mishpacha of the ger. And therefore, again, when the ger dies, and Reuven admits his liability, then halacha l'maisa the Kohanim inherit the ger. So hainu diyar si moris. So we'll say, so ultimately again, look at Rashi. Rashi says, "Hainu hay diyaris Yerusha zos nafal lahen v'harein lifneihen she'ilu haya ger kayim haya zomer shachal panecha." So we'll say if they're inheritors, then they're in no better of a position than the ger himself. And just like if the ger was still alive and Reuven wanted to do tshuva, what would he be able to do? He returns the object to the ger, even though right now the object is absolutely worthless. So they have no taina. On the other hand, the imakabli matanos havu. I will say, but if we look at this as kind of like one of the matnos kahuna, no, maybe Gezel Hager, so when we say to receive a gift, it doesn't mean just sound like a gift. Maybe Gezel Hager is actually one of the Kohanic gifts that Kohanim are entitled to. If that's the case, the Gemara says, so I will say, if Gezel Hager is considered to be one of the matnos kuna, one of the Kohanic gifts, then I will say, in order for it to be a Kohanic gift, what do you have to do? You have to give the coin something of value. Therefore, again, this is not a value right now. Therefore, again, Reuven will be obligated to give them financial restitution. I want to hear this? Isn't this fascinating? So now that we've established that Kohanim get Gezel Hager, what is the nature of the entitlement? Are they inheritors? In which case, they're in no better position than the ger himself. And by the ger, if the ger was alive and Reuven wanted to return the chametz shavar lava Pesach, Reuven says, "Harei shalcha lefanecha." Here it is. It's yours. I stole this from you. I'm giving it back to you. That's it. And therefore, Kohanim also get chametz shavar lava Pesach, which is worthless, or maybe not. Maybe Gezel Hager is one of the matnos kahuna. It's one of the Kohanic gifts. If it's one of the Kohanic gifts, then ultimately, again, a gift, a matana is only a matana if what? If it has a value. value. And therefore, again, Reuven cannot return chametz sha'avar lava Pesach. Instead, what would he be obligated to do? He would be obligated to return the value of the item at the time that he stole it. Incredible. So Rav Zeira bai hachi. So we'll pick up on this. We'll say, so now, this is very exciting. Leave a little on a cliffhanger. We're getting now to a yesodistic question, which is Gezel Hager, are the Kohanim considered to be inheritors of the Ger? Or is Gezel Hager considered to be one of the Matnos Kuna, one of the Kohanic portions? To be continued and resolved in Eretz Hashem tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, Chayr Zoom, have a great day, everyone. And Reb Steve, Mazel Tov again. In Eretz Yisrael. Beautiful.